You might think pirates spent most of their time swinging from rigging, shouting air, and hunting buried treasure, right? But here's the kicker. Their biggest enemy wasn't rival Navy ships, nor was it storms or giant waves knocking them about. Nope, it was something way more low-key but equally deadly. Scurvy. Yeah, that sneaky malady that turned fearless buccaneers into weaklings with bleeding gums and wobbly legs, threatening to sink ships faster than cannonballs ever could. Now, here's something history books conveniently forget to mention. Pirates somehow managed to survive, and even thrive despite not having the faintest clue that vitamin C was lurking in a lime or lemon somewhere. Let me tell you something wild about this scurvy thing. Back in the golden age of piracy, if 100 sailors set out on a voyage, chances are around 90% of them could be laid up with symptoms if fresh fruit and vegetables weren't handy. And guess what? Ships carried salted meat and hardtack biscuits, but those bad boys had zero vitamin C. Spoiler alert. It didn't work. That's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The disease spread so fast, some crews lost more men to scurvy than fights with the English Navy. Talk about ruining a fearsome pirate reputation. Imagine a crew too weak to even swing a cutlass. So how the heck did pirates live with this ticking time bomb aboard their ships? And more importantly, how did they prevent scurvy without knowing a thing about vitamins? Turns out, pirates came up with a dozen genius, but incredibly odd, methods that saved thousands of lives. And trust me, these were not your usual eat-your-fruit lectures. Think of it like a pirate's version of early medical hacks, survival hacks plus a dash of trial, error, and downright weirdness. Let's dive into the first of these cunning tricks. Problem number 1. Fresh food didn't last long on a ship. Picture a typical long voyage lasting 3 or more months. Ships could store about 63-gallon barrels of salted meat and roughly the same amount of hardtack biscuits per 100 men, but fresh veggies. Forget it. They spoiled after 24 to 48 hours. Even the coldest holds couldn't stop rot. Pirates tried growing herbs indoors, but bad idea. Really bad idea. The plants would either die or attract rats and bugs, which pirates were ironically less worried about catching than the scurvy itself. So it was clear pirates needed a way to get vitamin C into their diets without the usual fresh fruit. The first failed attempts were painfully hilarious. Some captains, desperate to beat scurvy, insisted on eating rotten oranges because, hey, citrus must help somehow, right? Let's just say it wasn't pretty. Crew members ended up with stomach bugs, and the rotten fruit actually made things worse. Others tried boiling the fruit to make a concoction. Spoiler alert. Boiling kills most vitamin C, so 0 points there. And drinking seawater mixed with lemon juice. Yeah, that earned several sailors trip to the brig for passing out and tasting incredibly salty. Because nothing says fearsome like a pirate puking over the ship's rail. Now here's where it gets interesting. Pirates somehow figured out that fresh citrus preserved in alcohol retained some of its magic. That's right, the real genius was making lemon or lime-infused rum, which not only boosted morale during long voyages, but also delivered just enough vitamin C to stave off scurvy symptoms. No one at the time knew why, but modern chemistry reveals that the acid in citrus stays stable enough in alcohol to survive the long journey. It was essentially a pirate's version of a vitamin supplement, 40 to 60% effective in preventing scurvy according to later studies. Not bad for a bunch of booze-loving scallywags, huh? There's a legendary story from Captain William Dampier's voyages in the late 1600s, where his crew's survival was credited to this practice. Dampier famously noted that the consumption of sour oranges and lemons with fixed spirits kept scurvy at bay better than anything else. And here's a funny detail that history books miss. Crew members who were too seasick to keep food down would line up for their medicine shots of lime rum, turning scurvy treatment into the ship's happy hour. Apparently, nothing says health restoration like a bunch of ragged pirates necking fruity booze between cannon drills. Modern science calls it ascorbic acid preservation. But back then, it was just known as liquid courage with benefits. Coming off that sweet success, pirates also relied heavily on pickled and fermented foods, not just for flavor but as accidental scurvy prevention. Think of their voyage pantry as a messy lab of trials. Problem was, pickled vegetables might have some vitamin C left, but only if prepared correctly and consumed quickly enough. Failure stories are plenty here. Some captains stocked barrels of sour cabbage that turned into a smelly mush after weeks, delivering zero benefit but plenty of headaches, literally. In one recorded incident from the 1720s, a pirate ship's entire supply of supposed pickled greens was actually just Kewpie doll cabbage slush with giant worms. You can probably guess how that ended. The crew revolted, tossing barrels overboard and demanding fresh supplies that weren't nearly as gross. But the clever solution came in the use of sauerkraut. Yes, the fermented cabbage you're picturing. It was an accidental hero. Thanks to the fermentation process, sauerkraut retained 6 times more vitamin C than any other pickled alternative, making it one of the most effective scurvy fighters on board. The German merchantmen ships that pirates sometimes borrowed supplies from had been using sauerkraut since the late 1600s to great effect, and pirates learned to adopt the same. In fact, sauerkraut's vitamin C levels could stave off scurvy for 30 to 40 days of continuous consumption, which was basically a lifesaver. One hilarious anecdote involves Captain Henry Morgan's crew in the Caribbean, who took sauerkraut aboard during a particularly brutal 6-week cruise. The catch? No one liked the taste, so the crew hid the cabbage under everything from salted pork to dried fish to avoid eating it. Eventually, Morgan had to threaten a flogging for anyone caught sneaking past their ration, calling sauerkraut the devil's cabbage disguised as salvation. Still, it worked. The scurvy rates dropped drastically, leading to one of the healthiest pirate crews in history at that time. Think of it as their version of a wellness trend, except instead of yoga mats, it was barrels of stinky cabbage and a handful of cutthroat pirates muttering curses with every bite. Moving on from food, water presented another colossal challenge. You might think the ocean never runs dry, but clean, drinkable water was a luxury back then. Ships typically stored fresh water in oak barrels, but hot sun and salty air turned their supplies into a nasty, algae-filled swamp in just a few weeks. This made pirates desperate for a way to keep water potable and scurvy away. One of the earliest failures was the practice of collecting rainwater from poorly maintained decks. Bad idea. Really bad idea. The deck was covered in bird droppings, seaweed bits, and sometimes, surprise, barnacle bits. You can guess how that ended. Illness spread faster than rumors on a tavern night. Here's the clever part. Pirates figured out that keeping barrels sealed tight and rotating supplies before they became stagnant could prevent water from turning foul. They developed what was basically a primitive water treatment system, involving simple filtration by sand or charcoal, which filtered out some impurities and kept water tasting better for up to 45 days. Not exactly modern water purification standards, but hey, it's basically a pirate version of a Brita filter. This method boosted health dramatically, since scurvy symptoms worsen with dehydration, and maintaining hydration helped the body fight off deficiencies better. An unexpected benefit was that this also reduced the pesky outbreaks of dysentery and cholera, common killers aboard ships. A pirate ship named the Revenge in 1693 credited its surprisingly healthy crew over a 90-day journey to fresh water stored in tight barrels and filtered smartly. A rare log entry praising non-combat survival tactics. Imagine that less disease from water was as life-saving as the sword for these sea dogs. I guess even pirates had a moment where clean water was more precious than gold doubloons. But here's the kicker when it came to preventing scurvy with water. Some pirate captains took it a step further by mixing citrus juices right into the water barrels. Sounds gross, right? But it worked. Pirates sometimes wedged limes or lemons into barrels or sliced them up and tossed them inside, letting acidity slow bacterial growth and preserve vitamin content just long enough. This makeshift infusion turned boring old water into a health elixir, sort of a pirate's version of today's vitamin water, but with twice the salt and promises of mutiny if you finished the last sip. So between citrus-infused rum, sauerkraut, and filtered water barrels with lemon wedges, pirates had a solid 3-pronged defense against scurvy, all developed without any clue about vitamins or modern nutrition. It was trial, error, and a dash of luck, all while dodging cannonballs and cutlasses. But this was just scratching the surface of their genius defenses. Wait until we get to the next batch of bizarre but brilliant solutions they cooked up to keep themselves fighting fit on the open sea. Because believe me, Some of these will make you wonder if pirates were just lucky or actually the MacGyvers of the 17th century. Alright, so we've covered how pirates got their vitamin C fix from lemon-soaked rum, sauerkraut, and cleverly infused water barrels, basically turning their ships into floating pharmacies without even knowing it. But wait, there's more. Pirates were relentless in their improvisation, and their scurvy-fighting arsenal didn't stop there. You think they just ate cabbage and drank funky booze? These guys took survival to a whole other level, mixing bizarre, sometimes borderline ridiculous ideas inspired by trial, error, and sheer desperation. Now fasten your eye patch because here comes another problem. Cooking fresh food on a rocking ship was like trying to fry an egg on a roller coaster. The galley heat was unpredictable, and spices or herbs were rarer than a calm sea during a hurricane. Boiling water was standard to kill germs. But here's the catch. Boiling also destroys vitamin C. Pirates tried stewing citrus and veggies to soften them for easier eating. But the heat would zap the precious nutrient away faster than a schooner fleeing a warship. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Crew members ended up with mushy meals and scurvy sneaking back like a sneaky boarding party. But pirates eventually figured out how to preserve vitamin C's delicate punch while still getting some heat in their meals. Enter the art of cold-pressed broths and raw preparations. Instead of cooking lemons or cabbage into oblivion, some savvy captains ordered their crews to eat thin slices of raw lemon peel or tossed chunks of fresh Nassau fish, a lightly preserved fish, alongside uncooked herbs. Basically, they turned part of their meals into cold vitamin shots. It wasn't gourmet by any means, think of it as pirate sashimi, but it worked well enough to slow scurvy's grip. Captain Edward Teach's crew, yes, Blackbeard himself, reportedly insisted on raw citrus rations whenever possible on extended Caribbean patrols, and his men showed far fewer scurvy casualties than most, probably because nobody wanted to feel that. Rotting gums business when the Queen's Navy was just a cannonball away. Speaking of fresh, pirates also got creative with rationing systems that prioritized who ate what and when. You might think pirates were all chaos and shouting, but no, they had surprisingly strict food discipline. Without ration controls, the fearsome 25-man crews on typical ships could devour all the fresh or preserved vitamin-rich foods within weeks, leaving the rest to starve for nutrients. Bad idea. Really bad idea. Some captains tried handing out fruit based on rank or favor, which predictably led to mutiny, morale crashes, and a lot of grumbling over rotten fruit leftovers. You can probably guess how that ended. The smart ones adopted rotating rations, a system where each man got limited portions of fresh or pickled goods on a strict schedule to stretch their supplies across the entire voyage. That meant spreading out vitamin C intake just enough to keep symptoms at bay without running out. Pirates called it rationing the bite, which is ironic because they were usually known for taking whole chunks of your ship if you crossed them. A famous tale from the clutch of Captain Anne Bonny recounts her ordering rationed sauerkraut and lime slices for her crew during a 2-month blockade near Jamaica in 1718. Her men reportedly tolerated the quirky diet better than most, which led to one of the most unusually healthy pirate crews of her Caribbean ventures. Moral of the story: sometimes rough discipline stops scurvy in its tracks better than a blade. Now, here's a lesser-known but total game-changer: pirates' use of fresh forage whenever possible. You might think pirate ships stayed locked on the ocean until they saw land or treasure, but those scurvy-fighting buccaneers had a sixth sense for sniffing out edible greens ashore. Even in the bleakest places like the rocky Caribbean islets or windswept Atlantic coasts. Pirates weren't botanists, but they learned fast which wild plants didn't spike their gag reflex or kill them outright. Dandelion greens, wild chickpeas, and even seaweed made cameo appearances on pirate menus, often gathered during quick landings, beach raids, or stashed away in small gardens built on ship decks when weather allowed. But the reality of fresh forage came with major risks. Some crews tried munching unknown plants in tropical mangroves, hoping for a vitamin kick, only to be plagued with severe stomach cramps or strange rashes. Let's just say the unintended poison salad, made for comic relief at the captain's table, while at the same time nearly wiping out entire crews. The notorious pirate Bartholomew Roberts, aka Black Bart, reportedly lost a small squadron to such a botanical misadventure near Guinea in 1721, when his men consumed a batch of seemingly innocent berries that induced temporary paralysis. His solution: order explorers to learn the ropes of local edible plants before everyone's insides turned into a pirate's version of lava. Classic lesson learned the hard way. Jumping back to the ships themselves, maintaining hygiene wasn't just about keeping rats away or avoiding the dreaded plague of lice. It was also a sneaky way to prevent scurvy. Why? Because a clean body can absorb and utilize nutrients better. Plus, hygiene warded off infections that could compound vitamin deficiencies into serious health crises. But aboard pirate ships, basic sanitation was a nightmare. Facilities were crude at best, and fresh water for washing was precious, often rationed like liquid gold. Pirates tried bathing in seawater to save their water barrels, but that often left them smelling worse than a barnacle-covered keel. Talk about ruining your fearsome reputation. The genius workaround was frequent use of vinegar washes and citrus oils for scrubbing. Pirates dipped rags in diluted vinegar or squeezed lemon peels into wash water, acidic enough to kill germs, mildly antiseptic, and carrying a tiny vitamin C boost. These pirate tonics for personal hygiene were basically the 17th century version of hand sanitizer, just with a lot more swearing and less scent. Captain Henry Avery's crew famously credited daily lime scrubdums with reducing illnesses during their notorious Indian Ocean raids, boasting a hairier, funkier crew that was at least healthier than the average seafarer. But here's a twist. Pirates figured out that even their clothes played a part. Swapping out salty, sweat-soaked garments meant less risk of skin infections, but fresh clothes were a rare luxury. What they did instead was soak shirts and breeches in lemon juice or vinegar mixtures overnight. This practice helped slow down bacterial growth on fabric and helped sailors keep skin infections at bay, boosting their overall resistance, including to the ravages of scurvy. Not exactly a spa day, but hey, it was enough to keep the plague of bleeding gums from becoming bleeding everything. Pirates didn't know why it worked, but modern science confirms the acetic acid in vinegar slows microbial growth. So cheers to smelly vinegar shirts being a weird pirate wellness trend. Now, if you think pirates just took vitamin C seriously, wait until you hear about their obsession with morale-boosting rituals tied to health. Psychological health was huge on board, since despair could paralyze an entire crew faster than scurvy itself. Pirates believed strongly in rituals involving communal drinking, singing shanties, and even superstitious ceremonies that involved sharing citrus fruits as luck charms. One documented event in 1699 aboard the ship Adventure Delight describes a captain administering lemon wedges as a blessing before battle, promising protection from disease as much as from enemy fire. Interestingly, these rituals had real health benefits. Sharing citrus among men encouraged regular consumption, spreading out vitamin C intake naturally, and reducing hoarding or fighting over limited supplies. Plus, keeping spirits high encouraged better eating, drinking, and overall care, which lowered scurvy incidence indirectly. So while the science was missing, pirates invented a social vitamin concept centuries ahead of its time. Talk about MacGyvering your way to health with superstition and lemon slices. On top of all this, pirates were surprisingly tuned into the idea of rest as a weapon against scurvy. While it might sound counterintuitive, after all, pirates were famously workaholic and reckless. Captains knew an exhausted sailor was an easy target for infections and deficiencies, so they developed rotating watches and enforced sleep shifts that meant every pirate got at least 4 to 6 hours of quality rest, even on the roughest seas. This wasn't about comfort, it was hardcore survival psychology. The British Royal Navy picked up on this in the mid-1700s, noting that well-rested crews handled scurvy better, probably because adequate rest improves immune function and nutrient absorption. Pirates didn't understand the biology, but they had plenty of bad nights to learn the hard way that a knocked-out crew is a dead crew. This clever attention to sleep, combined with their food and water hacks, turned many pirate ships into remarkably resilient hellraisers who could survive voyages that would have decimated others. And finally, just to add insult to injury, pirates also made sure to finish off the day with a bit of medicine, but not the kind you'd expect. They were fans of posset, a curiously effective concoction made from hot milk, ale, sugar, lemon juice, and spices. Now, why is this relevant? Because that lemon juice again brought vitamin C, while the warmth and sugar helped ease digestion and combat seasickness. And the ale? Well, it helped get rum out of the cruise system enough to avoid lethal drunkenness while preserving morale. Posset was often prescribed by ship surgeons, and while it wasn't a cure-all, it eased symptoms early on and increased crew compliance with scurvy-preventing diets. Plus, it gave the whole deck a heavenly smell, until everyone realized it was mostly fermented spit and stale milk. Bad idea, maybe, but one that added a literal spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. So, putting all this together, citrus-infused rum, sauerkraut, fresh water filtration, raw food hacks, rationing, forage, hygiene rituals, rest scheduling, and posset, pirates managed to keep scurvy at bay without a single clue about vitamins. It was messy, often stinky, frequently gross, and sometimes downright strange, but it worked well enough to keep the pirate legend alive. In fact, you could argue that pirates were some of the earliest pioneers of nutritional science, forced by necessity to invent workaround centuries before vitamin C was even discovered. And here's the ultimate irony. While the British Royal Navy later credited lime juice supplementation for wiping out scurvy in the 18th century, it was those rowdy, rebellious pirates who laid much of the groundwork with their equally begrudging and experimental scurvy remedies. So next time you imagine pirates just as drunken sword fighters, remember they were part health innovators, part survival scientists, and all-around stubborn geniuses when it came to beating the odds on the high seas. Because if there's one thing to take home, it's this. Pirates didn't fight scurvy with science. They fought it with stubbornness, rotten cabbage, smelly vinegar shirts, and enough rum and lemons to make a lemonade stand jealous. And somehow, despite all odds and a total ignorance of vitamins, they won the battle more often than not. So raise your grog, swallow your sauerkraut, and tip your tricorn to the unsung heroes of nutritional improvisation, the swashbuckling, scurvy-fighting legends of the pirate age.